Well, I would love to ask John to speak on his book, Awakening from Grief, and to talk about, for just a few minutes, about what you perceive the awakening is and how important you feel that surrender, trust, accept and receive are to that awakening and to that process.
Surrender, trust, accept, and receive. Great.
And before you start, I just want to say that my own awakening was, it just happened, it just felt like almost instant. That I felt that I felt very much asleep after I had the contrast of feeling what it felt like to be so awake. And that grief just brought me to a different level in life. And so I'm going to give it over to you to speak on that.
Wow. How long do we have? Wow. Well, the first thing that I'd like to say, and I really appreciate your incredibly gracious introduction, but the first thing that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said to us when I studied with her, and I was just reflecting on the fact that it was just down the road in Orinda at John F. Kennedy University. We had a weekend conference at UC Berkeley, and then the group moved out to Kennedy University for intensive training. So there, Elizabeth opened her remarks the first morning by saying, "Darlings, let me dispel you of the notion that you are here to become an expert. There are no experts in this business." And somebody told me recently I was making her sound like Zsa Zsa Gabor. But I think, as the further I go in this work, and it's been almost 40 years really, if I count my first experience of sitting at the bedside of someone who was dying, it was my mother, which I wrote about in Awakening from Grief. And that was in 1969, so that makes it 41 years. But I guess that's a good place to start because as I described in Awakening from Grief, it was one of the most extraordinary experiences. My mother was dying of a brain tumor, and she wanted to come home. And in 1969, there were no hospices. No one in this culture had ever heard the word hospice. When I first heard it, I thought someone was mispronouncing hospital, And we didn't know what that was. And as I wrote in the story, the doctor said to us, well, I can understand that she wants to come to her own home, but after all, that's a terrible mess. You don't want that in your house. And even in that moment, some part of me intuitively said, a mess? Wait a minute. This is the most profound experience my mother is ever going to go through, and therefore probably the most profound experience I've had to date. And the doctor's calling it a mess. Now he, I don't say that to put him down. He was trying to protect the family because that was the mindset in those days. No one would want to be around that. And that really comes from our culture. It's what Chris was talking about, that we have a culture that I've tried to understand when it started, when this aversion to death started. And the best thing that I can come up with is sometime after the Second World War, because there had been so much death and so much loss and so much sadness and destruction in the world that the soldiers came home from the war. If any of you know people who were in like the Normandy invasion, where the soldiers saw such horrific things and basically decided amongst themselves that that was where that day, if I recall correctly, 1 out of 10 soldiers survived that invasion. So 9 out of 10 were killed. And the one who survived was left looking and saying, why me? You know, and the images of all of their friends, all these young men dying. And they said, best to never talk about it. That was a big mistake. A big mistake. But it was what everybody thought was the best thing to do at the time. And they came home, and the culture said, okay, the war is over. Let's have affluence, let's have fun, let's be happy, happy, happy all the time. And that was actually the period when funeral directors started seeing a boom in their business, because what we then did as a culture was we said, well, like we do with everything else, let's hire a professional to take care of the problem for us. We don't know how to do it. And so in 1969, when my mother was dying, we had no tools to deal with it, and it just had to be on-the-job training. And it was an interesting experience because my mother lost the ability to speak because of her brain tumor. She became aphasic and then just stopped talking. And I had a hard time going in her room to see her because I didn't know what to say. I thought I had to have something to say, and I didn't know what to say. And finally I thought, I'll just go in and be with her. And I sat down on the edge of her bed, and I took her hand in my hand, and we held hands. And for the next hour or more, we just sat and gazed into each other's eyes. And it was one of the most extraordinary experiences I'd ever had. Because I felt like I was looking into a place in my mother's being that transcended her body, that transcended her personality. It was that inner light that we began to explore just a little bit in our meditation. And since that time, one of the most extraordinary experiences in life that I've found is looking in other people's eyes and seeing that light. And I realize it's the same light. There's only one of it. It's in all of us.
I'm Lisa, and this book really, Chris's book and John's book just really spoke to me. Amazing. And I think with Chris, your book, what really spoke to me was how you honored your grief and you honored your feelings and you did what you needed to do to go through that process and fully experience it. And to just be with that. And I'm at a place in my life where I am going to end a 23-year relationship, a 20-year marriage. So in essence, life as I've known it is going to end and change. And so dealing with that, but what I've found in the process is that I've really shut down. I've closed my heart probably in the last 5 years. So in essence, I feel I've been dead in those last 5 years. So what I got from you and John's book as well is that sometimes you have to feel again and go to that grief place, experience grief fully in order to have the capacity for joy. Experience that totally. And what I found is that I've numbed myself out. And so in this journey of just rediscovering myself the last 2 years and coming to what is true for me and how unhappy I've been and how I've lost myself, I used to be so full of life and joy in that feeling, being able to feel. And trying to rediscover that, just allowing that space, and that's what spoke to me so much. Look at, there was so much of this book that I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so true for me. This is so true for me. It just so spoke to my heart. Both of your books so spoke to my heart. And so for me, it's about opening my heart and coming from that place. And I am on a different path. I'm going back to school, and I'm going to be an ER nurse. And I'm going to be applying for a master's in nursing at UCSF. And in addition to that, I'm going to start a hospice work. And I've already done my training, and I will be actually starting in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, beautiful.
So, and that is the opportunity for me to really open my heart that has been shut down. So,
And here you are,
yes.
sitting with John.
Yes. So
Who knew?
I thank you both
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank
for the blessings
Welcome.
and the
Thank
gifts
you.
that you bring and share to others.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.